Today I'm speaking to Panos Kostopoulos. Panos is a chemical engineer and food biotechnologist who is dedicated to advancing sustainable food solutions. He is the founder and CEO of Proxy Foods, and there he focuses on utilizing AI for recipe formulation and optimization to streamline food and beverage product development. He's passionate about cellular agriculture, and he's also the co-founder of both the Network for Cellular Agriculture and Cellular Agriculture Greece. And there he works to promote research and education in that field. Panos has experience in scientific research and product development, and he's contributed to projects exploring alternative protein sources and cultivated seafood application. And he's got a commitment to animal advocacy and the integration of technology in food production, which underscores his mission to create more sustainable and ethical food system. We're really happy to have Panos here today, and we're looking forward to a great conversation. Today, everyone, I have Panos Kostopoulos, who is a chemical engineer and food biotechnologist. Panos has got a new venture going. He's the CEO of Proxy Foods. We're going to learn all about that and also all about the technology and things that he's working on. So Panos, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Daniel. I'm very happy to be here and talking to you again.
Great. So you're in Washington. I'm in Zurich, across the ocean here. Interesting things happening in the US, I think, in this space of the food regulation and whatnot. Maybe we'll get into that. But to start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into doing what you're doing now, and what you're into with your new venture, Proxy Foods here.
Of course, absolutely. So I echo how interesting are the times, and I think we're going to see effects in both sides of the Atlantic, in both sides of the Pacific. So we will stay tuned and see what will this be the actual effect. But interesting times for sure. Like we have content. So a little bit about me. I'm a chemical engineer. I studied, born and raised in Athens, Greece, as you could guess from my name, how I look and how I speak. I did undergrad and grad studies there. I knew pretty early on that I wanted to become an engineer. Back in the day, I was thinking more of a mechanical engineer. Very early age on, I had a motorcycle. I would disassemble it like a small internal combustion engine, two-stroke. So I was very, very keen on constructions and understand how systems work. Back in the day, we had the crisis, so mechanical engineering in Greece at the point was usually building elevators, and we're struggling. So the chemical engineering side seemed most promising. So I focused on this path. Then I was working for the industry and the academia in different roles, from the dental to cement to pharmaceuticals. But at some point, I ended up living with an adopted puppy, like a black lab, which really shaped my perspective. It was my girlfriend at the time, and living with animals at the same house really gives you a different perspective, not only about how do they think or how do they feel, but also what do they eat, how do they respond to food, and you're trying to understand like a whole new food system. That made me think more about our food choices, and I ended up with after some research, with some conclusions. Number one, what am I going to eat is the most universal question. You're a Greek guy, an Italian, an American, an African. It doesn't matter where you are. Everybody asks what I'm going to eat. Not even humans, like all the animals, all species. Even if you're a fun guy, what am I going to eat is the most universal question. And our collective answers have an impact on us, on our ecosystem, on the whole planet. Number two was, I realized that every part of me used to be food and probably will end up a food at some point. So, you realize that you are what you eat, and, eat your food like medicine. Otherwise, you will eat your medicine as food. And according to this research, I think it was from Lancet back in 2019, from 1995 to 2017 or so, they studied thousands of people around 150 countries, I think, and it was 1 in 5 deaths was due to health and diet. At the same time, huge contribution in agricultural emissions. Food system is the most advanced system that affects all humanity. We don't have any other system that you will move energy and packets of food around the globe. And also have, all these ethical implications about what we're feeding our children, how do we grow, how do we feed, the animals, and all of that. So, it was like pretty solid reasons to focus on food. So I was like, as a chemical engineer, what can I do? And the closest thing I could do was biotechnology. So I stopped what I was doing and I did my thesis in biotech. I did some research. Back in the day, we were producing omega-3 fats, DHA, from microalgae using lignocellulosic substrate. So wood waste that would break down and would feed the sugars into microalgae and would make them fat and would accumulate omega-3, mostly DHA. So that was, my first actual experience with pipettes, dilutions, GCMS, and all of that stuff. So chemical engineering, biotech to get closer to food, to help with all these pressing questions. And then I want to maximize my impact. And, I said, what can I do? And I turned the globe. I opened, Google Earth. I was like, where should I move? Where is like the best promising field? And, US and biotech seemed as the best combination at the time. So I applied to Georgetown University. I got accepted to the biomedical school at the biotechnology department for grad studies. I moved there. And in the meantime, I co-founded Cellular Agriculture Greece. Now I'm the co-founder and president of the Network of Cellular Agriculture, which is a network of many cell labs around the globe, more than 20 countries at the moment. And while studying, and I had experience with R&D for both developing products, commercializing, a more traditional hardcore R&D, also academic R&D. And I knew how complex was that. And while I was studying bioinformatics, I wanted back at the day, and sorry for my long response, I'm trying to give
It's
you
okay.
all the context. I was trying to see if we would be able to predict, because you have all these genomic sequence databases, if we could go from DNA, RNA, protein, and predict specific genomic sequences that will have the secondary, tertiary, quaternary structure that will have the organoleptic attributes that we want. Back then, we couldn't be able neither to predict the secondary structure, and I was discussing this problem with my professor at the time. And a few weeks later, AlphaFold was released by DeepMind, and it was such a mind-blown moment for me. Wow, because I knew that how complex was this task. I knew that humans would not be able to solve it, having to deal with all its nucleotide, its base, all of these things. And I was like, okay, we have something that can achieve breakthroughs. So that's how I learned first like about AI, and then I was like, okay, I want to learn more about it and studying more through the bioinformatics, but trying to understand how can you apply AI. And you need three things. You need a lot of data, you need to have this. You need a combinatorial data space. You need different permutation and combinations, so you'll be able to run iterations, and you need a feedback mechanism. Either it's gonna be a crystallography, or it's like you're trying, or any way of feedback that the system will train. And where do we have food combinations and feedback? Data combinations and feedback. That's in food. So I was like, okay, we can apply to help like food product developers, because me back in the day I was taking so much time to go from Excel spreadsheet, doing an ingredient, changing the regulatory, because it's like a balloon. You change one side, you see the effect on the other side, and having to juggle between cost, supply chain, like regulations, the flavor, shelf life, stability, like odor, nutritional value, safety, like all of this. And you have all of this data associated with that, and we didn't have enough tools. And we didn't have enough tools for good reasons, not for justified reasons. So engineering, food, biotech, US, AI, and proxy foods in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. And so in your company, you mentioned cellular agriculture a few times. So are you quite focused on cell ag as a outcome from the type of work you're doing in data, or in your company, are you also focusing on just general food formulation and food development, or is it really, are you specifically interested in cellular ag?
No, as a company, we focus on general food formulation and
Mhm.
general R&D innovation.
Uh-huh.
My non-profit focuses on cell agris, and the NCA, and there we do different activities on how to support the current ecosystem.
Mm,
But the problems most cellular agriculture companies now have, including both biomass, precision fermentation, and cell cultivated meat, it's more about they need to solve how they can maximize the yield, scale up, and reach consistency in their output. And most of these products now are, these companies, they produce ingredients that these
mm,
ingredients can be used for a food company. So you may produce cell cultivated fats, you may produce a biomass fermented mycelium, you may produce through precision fermentation recombinant lactoferrin or casein or albumin. And I think the cellular agriculture at the moment is more on the ingredient and how, downstream, upstream, like understanding the cells, maximizing that. How do you have the right separation, filtration of the ingredients that you want to produce? So we focus a little bit closer to post harvest and closer to the formulation side as proxy. As proxy,
mm,
we help with the companies that would take these ingredients, and we would try to minimize the iterations that they need to do in a streamlined way, and giving feedback in order to get more accurate predictions each time. So proxy more on the formulation, closer to the end application. Cell ag, we focus on for many areas, but as proxy we don't focus on that specifically.
okay. What not to I mean, I guess we could talk about either topic. Cell ag is something that's very interesting to me from a kind of innovation cycle and commercialization perspective, right? Because I've been, I guess I've been in this industry now for 8 or 9 years, and first plant-based was of course the big thing. Now we've seen a little bit of a retraction in interest in plant-based from the large food companies, and it's typically the large food ingredient companies that drive real change in the on the shelf, right? Obviously, they're almost never on trend, right? Like they're almost always off trend. And it takes them a couple of cycles to get on trend, right? Like, they're behind the innovators, and then they've gone too far, and then they pull back, and eventually they I think they reach some sort of equilibrium. And my prediction is the next 2 3 years that equilibrium will come to happen in the plant-based space. But in the cell ag space, I, I haven't heard a whole lot of hype around this recently. I mean, there was about a year ago, quite a bit about investment in that space, and new technology development and yield and et cetera, et cetera. But it hasn't been so much the forefront of what I've been reading lately. Maybe you're probably much more close to it. Maybe you want to share a little bit about where you think it's at last 12 months, next 12 months, because I do think that this is an evolving space. I always thought it was more viable than the plant-based protein solution. But you're right, it's more complex for sure. So,
Yeah. So,
mm,
you know, regarding the plant-based, I think, you know, I completely agree. The big companies that they have the distribution, that they have access to the shelves, that they can collect data from consumers, that they have the production, that they have everything in place, would be the companies that, in large, they feed the world. And, if they will see that consumers are willing to adopt plant-based proteins or other, will be the first to be able to serve this need. We saw a hype around 2021, and during COVID, there was like a big psychology implication, and we can discuss about why this happened. But after that, we see a decline, and I think people going post-COVID. The two things, I think, if there are multiple reasons why we have a decline in plant-based. if I could say three things, number one would be uh, many of these products were considered ultra processed foods, and we see a trend about against ultra processed foods, and everybody's going anti UPFs, and this is now the big trend. So many of these products, arguably, correctly or no, some of them, they were more processed than other, but I think the consumer would not be able to differentiate even, what ultra processed means, but this falls into under the umbrella that these are,
Yeah. Plus the fact that, so much of what they're consuming already are technically ultra processed foods as well. It's just that the media hasn't identified them as such, right? And they're already habituated to purchasing and eating those foods, right?
Yeah, in a sense, I don't even know, what's processed, what is ultra processed. Olive oil is a type of processed food, but it's super
Mm,
healthy.
mm.
There was kind of a misunderstanding, but also like kind of like what is UPF, but people seem to hate them. And it's much easier to find the reasons to not change habits and stay in your convenient, delicious steak or chicken wings that you're eating than trying to adopt a soy-based or pea protein product that maybe will not have the organoleptic characteristics, or maybe you haven't built the familiarity. And I think familiarity, people who don't spend enough time on that, and especially with food. Familiarity means safety. We are entrenched for many thousands of years of that. And with food, if you would eat something and you would be fine, your organism would say, your brain, eat that again. I think many of people still the context of familiarity and these all new novel products, even if tempe or some products they might be around for thousands of years, but it's about the perception of familiarity. And at the same time, I think the taste, and the taste also is part of the familiar. Our taste buds adapt. We are, master of habits. We had to be able to like what nature would provide us and time on each location. So that's a comment on plant-based, and I think we're gonna see a correction. Like you see like the cycles now. We're going to find new sweeteners alternatives. Now we're against sucrose, and now it's all about gut health and microbiome and studying all these things. And then we go back, to a specific diet. So I believe that we're gonna see a cycle now. We're gonna see a correction regarding the plant-based now. Regarding the cellular agriculture, and by the way, we will see more of like blurred lines between all of these products, plant-based products that will have cell-based, cell-cultivated fats, or precision fermented. You may have plant-based dairy products with recombinant casein that will give the texture that you want, or you maybe have like a dry supplements that will have a combination of these ingredients, even hybrid meats, both conventional and alternative products. Now, regarding the cellular agriculture, what's that? This is a suite of um, technologies around biotech, tissue engineering, and synthetic biology that allows you to create specific ingredients using cells. The two main technologies are cellular and acellular. There's no, these are two main definitions. And what acellular means, usually we refer to precision fermentation, recombinant proteins, where you use a microorganism to produce something that you want. This can be through genetically modification, through a plasmid that you put the DNA part to express what you want, or this can be also, you use yeast to produce the cheese or the beer, but you don't have the cells in the outcome. This is the cellular. With the cellular, here you have the cells. So this can be a specific, fungi species from Neurospora to yeast to any kind of mycelium or even non-fungi species that you will produce and have biomass fermentation. So you produce everything and you consume the cells, not only the products of the cells. And then cell cultivated meat, which largely is mostly associated with cellular agriculture, but cellular agriculture is the umbrella of these various technologies. Cell cultivated meat is closer to tissue engineering. This is we had to learn from how tissue engineering in pharmaceuticals and other applications, how we could grow cells um, for health and medical reasons, and now how we can grow cells to produce food. There are many challenges in any of these technologies. My guess is that for now, what we're gonna see in the next years is like biomass fermentation is what we see now. We see many great companies being on the shelf. We have the market. I think mid-term precision fermentation, we're gonna see high value added ingredients for multiple applications, from supplements for plant-based products to nutraceuticals to even other adjacent industries that we will be able to produce in lower cost these high value ingredients, usually proteins. And then we have the cellular cell cultivated meat, which I think this will take the most time. This,
Mhm.
Daniel, cells are ruthless. Don't care if you have raised, $500 million or 300 million. If they don't want to scale in this big bioreactor, if they're going to be contaminated, they will do it, and they don't care. So going from specific cell type to create a 3D tissue, I think this will take time. But what we will see first is specific high value cells that will be incorporated as part of other products. And first and most important, like adipocyte fat cells. So I think this is what we will see in the near term future. And then we need to solve many issues from the right mediums, so the growth mediums, what we're gonna feed the cells, from specific bioreactors, from scaling up to reducing the cost, understanding how we standardize cell lines, and all of these things. So this will take time, and I think it's going to be the most delayed, but probably even the long-lasting technology that will have significant impact, but in some years from now. And I think we're going to have, a combination of technology as we have now. You grow meat, you have dairy, you grow plants, and somehow, you have end products.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think there should be concern around like the genetic diversity of these products in the end? Because as you said, there aren't that, it takes special cells to be able to persist in reproduction in this way, right? And so you lose this genetic variation of the actual organism.
Well, I think we have much larger issues with genetic variability with the monocrops and what we're growing, and we lose the ability of resistance or we make ultra resistant specific strains, and we're
Mm,
also gonna have like a very selected profile in our microbiome. So I mostly
mhm,
focus on that because these cells and these cell lines will be dedicated areas with specific cells, and you can walk around it. But many of the lettuces or bananas that we have, people were trying to find the most resistant or the highest yield, and we ended up with a few strains. And if we have, for any reason, problems, I think um, this genetic absence of variability will have more issues than with cellular agriculture. Now, regarding the bioengineering part, like I will say the answer that's the only valid at the moment. It depends.
mm.
So.
Okay. All right. All right. Previously you were talking about the resistance to ultra processed food. So like consumer exception is a massive component of this. And I always like to tell people that it seems that in food, consumer acceptance goes in waves of at least 15 to 20 years for very new products, right? Because the way that we eat is highly linked to our emotional memory, like our childhood memory, our cultural growings up. Like you grew up in Greece, of course now you're in the US, maybe you'll have a family one day in the US. And so, I mean, I have a family here. So there's all these, changes that happened over generations, but we, as most humans on the planet, were born and grew up in a particular culture in a particular place, and then this like connection to food as part of culture and part of memory and happiness is a very big factor. And I sense it also in myself. I'm almost 50 years old, so I also just choose not to consume a lot of these products, not because I'm against them necessarily. I think intellectually they make a lot of sense, but it's because I don't miss not having meat. I don't eat a lot of meat, and I don't really feel that I need to. But I definitely recognize in younger generations that they're totally willing to, so they approach it in a very different way. So, have you had any? we've never done, like in my company, any research on cellular ag products because there aren't any in the market to do research on, right? But we've done work on plenty of the plant-based products, and most of the reasons for people being interested in this was, advertising, sustainability, animal welfare, and things like that. Um, but also you could see that now that people are strongly going back to what they really like and what they are rooted in. I think that it takes a while for it to take off. And have you seen any data? I mean, of course, you don't also have access to products that are in the market, but have you done any research or consumer feedback or have any insight into maybe the differences between acceptance of these types of cell ag products versus plant-based products, and maybe just make some comments on that. So.
Yes, of course. And well, and it's not only, I think the cellular agriculture is not going to, it's not to replace the meat industry and people consuming meat. I think for many years it's going to be a complementary part, and animals play a significant role in the food ecosystem, from the manure, from the conversion of the carbon nitrogen cycles and everything. And just to clarify. From my point of view, that I don't think it's white or black, and people should consume what makes them feel healthy or happy, or it's aligned with other choices. Now, regarding the plant-based versus the cell-cultivated products, there was this part that plant-based was more fresh, healthy, like natural. It's plant-based, and we have entrenched this part of plants in our minds. This is quite opposite with the cell-cultivated meat in many people approach, and what we see. We see many people that they love the idea because they love meat, they love how it tastes, they love like to receive their protein in that form. They love to have their barbecues and say, but they also love the idea of not hurting animals or having a more sustainable way to feed them. So the drivers are quite different, and I think also the audience that these technologies are targeting are quite different. And also, just a comment on the familiarity. I completely agree, as I also said in the beginning. By the way, back in Greece, when I was eating cilantro, it would taste like soap. Like it would, I couldn't stand cilantro. I came here, cilantro, I think, is one of the most ubiquitous things you will find in the US. There was some point that this hate turned into love. Now, I love cilantro, I put everything. So it was like, this took me around 14 months. I don't know exactly when it was the point that I'm okay, I'm more than okay, I like it. But, and maybe things how we grow up, but also if you have a very drastic change of environment, as I had, I left everything in Greece. I took my suitcase and I came here with whatever that means. I think my body and my taste buds adapted much more rapidly than they would adapt with limited exposure of cilantro if me being back in Greece, which is it's an interesting case to see about the familiarity, the adoption, and the likability of specific products. Some of the challenges though with cell-cultivated meat would see people will be consider it as synthetic, not natural, like lab-grown meat. Even like these people, they want to eat their steaks and they're feeding us this like fake stuff because they're mean people. All the theories. So I think it's much harder for the people that will be able to adopt, not everybody, some people, this technology as natural, as part of their diet. However, when this technology will be mature, uh, the products will have organoleptic properties much more similar to, to the real thing, to the meat that they used to have, and not having, something that tries and have all these different ingredients and components and additives and flavorings to be closer to this thing. And the familiarity, the two things I would like to mention here. Something which is quite known in the industry about the experiment of ice. Back in the day, companies would go with sell blocks of ice and sell them to the houses. And then you had the freezer, and the companies back in the day, they would say this is not for food, it's gonna have poison, this is not natural, this is synthetic. But what was the chance that somebody had died close to this water and was contaminated, and you unfroze it and you had issues than having a freezer? And now nobody thinks of ice as a natural safe thing. I think we're also gonna see the same thing. What you say about familiarity with milk, how many people now, when they talk about ultra processed foods, like they take the milk, they have the water, they have homogenization, they have pasteurization, they have the packet in all the process of dairy milk, and they have it in a carton, and you drink it, and we are all fine with that and with this process. How many people would feel fine going under a cow or a goat and squeeze and have the milk directly? I think this will create more of like a unfamiliar experience. So that means it's not natural. It's as natural as it gets if we consider the consumption of the animal. But you see the exposure, the familiarity, the technologies of people doing it around you, of the normalization and the repeated exposure to this without hurting you creates all these subconsciously and like conscious decision that this is safe and it's fine. So when we have done research, including with some with the Good Food Institute, both in Europe and in Greece, and with New Harvest, we're also collaborating with the NCA to see what would be the approach, and what we see different audiences, different issues, different methods, different benefits, different drivers, different barriers.
What do you think about regulation? I mean, in particular, we've seen what happened in Italy, right? And now in the US, it's anybody's guess as to whether or not these types of products will come under the guise of the new administration. I mean, of course, we all know the slant that has. Regulation could play a pretty big role here. Has the industry started to prepare itself for that? I mean, regulation plays also a role in electric vehicles and drones and everything else. I mean, it's not a scary thing. It's just, it is what it is, right? So,
Yeah. Of course, and when you formulate a product, you should start with the regulations from the beginning, not how it used to happen in the end. And also at Proxy, we have a big focus on regulation and how we can streamline and help companies be aware of any regulations, like ensure the compliance from the very early steps on, because the regulatory mistakes or negligences can be very painful and damaging for for the company, for multiple stakeholders, and they definitely drive innovation and the direction of the companies. And I believe that there is time for uh, updating regulations. I'm not sure if all the regulations at the moment, all the food additives out there should be used for all these use applications. So as long as the regulatory, will balance the first and most important, the safety, the safe consumption of products to the consumers, and number two, give adequate time to the food companies to adapt, and if usually they give enough time, I think many of the regulatory changes will be for the good. And I think this will take place in both the US and Europe. I think we'll see Europe a little bit more agile in the regulations. I think we'll see that in the near future. I think the US will, with the current administration, we will see kind of approach to more transparent labeling, a better understanding of specific additives and what is the potential health impact, as we saw with red dye 3 very recently, and as we will see with more additives. And honestly, there are some additives used in the US and nowhere else in the world. So in all the changes will always bring some kind of chaos, but not always this gonna be good. I think it's a good time to take a step back and see, because we have more data, we have more analysis, we have more knowledge. to maybe restructure a little bit the regulations regarding the whole food. Now, regarding the regulation of cellular agriculture, we don't have a product yet to regulate. Like, I don't think that the efforts of banning what happened in Italy, I find it like quite absurd. Like, preventing the technology, scientific research in that area. If we have any instances that this can be damaging, or we are in a commercialized, or we have large volume of products, and we have any kind of inclination that this shouldn't be something on the shelves of the products, I would take a step back, and I'm always pro first the safety of the consumers. But now some of the bans are more like media marketing, or trying to say, not in my house, I don't definitely agree for unsubstantiated preventing in overall, like, scientific areas. I think it moves a little bit things backwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar things happen like in the alternative energy space, right? You had, the oil companies had lobby and I suppose there were not safety concerns, but there are a lot of other concerns and arguments as to why these types of products, or innovations shouldn't be more ubiquitous. But over time, those were defeated and time marches on, right? I think that's a little bit the way to think about it. It's tough for investors though, right? I think that's the main thing that I've seen in the industry is that you have a lot of founders who are obviously very passionate about what they're doing. And they're, I think a little bit misguided around the timing of some of this, but I suppose what else can they do, right? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, if you're a founder in one of these spaces, you must know many if you're running this nonprofit. How do you think about that? Because you need to have money for R&D. There's no doubt you need to seek investors, but those investors also, really, it's very difficult for you to talk to them with any sort of real assurance around the timing of their return, right?
Like, I think we had like kind of cycle of all these big promises that were not realized. And, in the beginning, people didn't understand the complexity of growing, different type of cells, like fish cells, mammalian cells, and doing that in a consistent way, trying to compete with an industry that is doing that for so many years, so many people, and like these big companies are feeding the world, and they have so many scientists for so many years, so much feedback to optimize that, using some of the most hardcore, difficult technologies and being able to compete with something that's around for thousands of years. I think this was never going to end up pretty well in the beginning. And I saw people very passionate, but some of the times they didn't understand, or they were expecting the complexity would be different, or if you have a specific breakthrough, this will lead to another breakthrough and another breakthrough, and this will lead to a chain reaction. I think many of these companies were focusing on this potential chain reaction, but as we said, cells take time to grow. Like the research takes time. This is like a hardcore R&D, and especially with mammalian cells, the doubling times are, they're not like, yeah, E. coli or other things that you can do quick research. It will take time and the validation, and they were expensive, and it was not enough industry knowledge. So maybe we know about pork and about pigs and stuff, but people didn't know about so much about other species in tissue engineering. Was not interested, because for us to do tissue replacement in scar tissue in chickens or in shrimps or in tuna, so there was not even enough knowledge around it. And first we saw like companies were focusing on product categories. Oh, I'm gonna do tuna. Oh, I'm gonna do beef. Oh, I'm gonna do chicken. It was like market derived, but not
Mhm.
technology derived. And then we realized, oh, but this is very different. This type of cell, oh, this is very different. No, maybe I don't know, you cannot use FBS like the medium, or maybe cannot use now. Or, you start seeing, we saw like the realization of companies, I'm gonna conquer this industry that, okay, I'm gonna focus on specific growth factor, or I'm gonna focus only on bioreactors. So we have, from I'm gonna do everything, I'm gonna do something very, very specific. So I think the industry matures so much. Like the first approvals in Singapore, here, in Washington D.C., that we had the tastings. The overall understanding and knowledge was so much more mature now than it used to be. And I think and how do you raise money? Maybe people would never raise money if they would say we need 10 years. And maybe they would say, okay, I'm going to say now to raise money, and then I'm going to do this milestone, and this milestone will lead to the next milestone, and going back to the chain reaction. But now, many investors, they don't have patience. And regarding on the fund, sometimes if they're struggling or they're near the zombie fund, they want to see the ROI as fast as possible. And they're not doing that for the next 20 years. They don't even care what will happen in the next 20 years. So you have like a little bit the chicken and the egg problem, what people should have done. Or if they have done anything differently. The truth is that now the funding is after 21 that was peak, is very low, but there are so many great minds, researchers, both in the academia and the industry, that are trying to tackle some of these issues with a more sober approach, more realistic. We're going to solve this specific issue, and this can help with other technological advancements. And we're going to see, we're going through the disillusion phase. Many
Mm-hmm.
companies will, very sadly, will not be here with us the next years. Many companies will survive. Many companies will adapt. But overall, I think we achieved significant breakthroughs, and this is not something we'll see in the next few years. Like, understanding how these things, it's going to take time. And then in between, we're going to see high value ingredients be incorporated in other products. This is what we'll see. And then maybe like a 3D printed Wagyu A5 Kobe steak will be in many years from now.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were to give some advice to, somebody coming into the industry or thinking about what to study in school, I think it's a smart thing for young people to think about how they can get into a space that's growing and where their skill set will have wider application over time, right? Because a career is long, and I think in particular these days, changes happen very quickly, so it's hard to predict what's going to happen next. Would you give any advice to like what to study, how to think about the the industry, how they can get involved? What are your thoughts? I think you're kind of in the middle of your career. I'm more towards maybe the latter part of mine. So I don't have a lot of chance to study things that are new. Um, so what kind of advice would you give in that case?
We can always study, we're always learning. So, uh, what advice I would give? Number one, I would, you know, ask people to find a very strong why, and then they will find all the hows. Because uh, try to find the area that you want to focus, do diligent research, and we saw that with AI. We saw many companies claiming they're doing AI, and it's maybe just like an API of ChatGPT or another LLM. And you see companies saying that we're going to do cellular agriculture, and they have these illusions of where we are and what they're going to build. And you have companies claiming that this is an ultra processed food, which may be so. Many people claim many things and may not always be the truth. And the universal truth maybe is very obscure to find. So I would ask people, number one, to find their own personal, as much universal truth, what they feel based on their research, their feelings, their ethics, makes sense to them to focus. So I think this is the most important thing. And with Proxy, we're trying to solve one of the most complex issues, the formulation. If you think like the food formulation, especially like with fragrances, if it has a great aroma and you have like, it doesn't make your clothes, and it has a stability, like, you know, you're good. And you imagine food, it has to be fresh, it doesn't have to be safe with your nutritional value. You have to taste good, it has to have a good aftertaste, have a good flavor. You have like very thin margins. And we're trying to solve something very complex with a very largely unfunded department. R&D is the first area companies take their money off because it's a problem of tomorrow and not problem of today. 1 to 3% average industries in something where you have to deal with trade secrets, and one of the most complex formulation, with pharma, all these micromolecules, all these interactions, and the processes and the scaling up. But what do we do? Because I think this is going to catalyze innovation, because all the complexity will give the toolbox, will have a great impact, and we're trying to maximize the impact. We're trying to give these tools to as many people as possible to maximize that. So for me, that was pretty clear in my goals, and I'm fine, doing things and working so hard for something. I know that it's not the most largely funded industry. I know it's not biotech. I know it's, what R&D means in the F&B, but I'm personally fine with my decision. So I think being personally fine with these people and their choices is very important. And then some other things: network and collaborate. You are the average of the 5 people you spend most of the time with, and and networking and who do you know is critical. Having the right mentors, having the right advice, having the right people to guide you, inspire you, but also build things together. Be patient and persistent, and the only way to do that is if you know that you love what you're doing and it makes sense, even if it's very, very complicated. But you see, like the impact and the positive outcome that you may have. Um, and like, find the area, be persistent, be resilient, do your own independent research, focus, and then hands-on. I think the hands-on experience is the most important. Do internship, develop your own products, do your own research, go whatever is that. I'm now talking about research, but in any positions, marketing, regulatory, try to solve real problems and try to build something people want. In a nutshell.
Yeah, it's always the tough thing. Build something people want. It's you never know what they want sometimes, particularly in the long term. But anyway, it's good advice. So what's next for you all with, are you full steam ahead with Proxy Foods? Are you like, where are you spending most of your time these days, and seeing where you can have the most impact? Just here as a closing remarks.
Well, 95% of my time goes to Proxy, and probably 90% of my awake time goes to Proxy, like 7 days of the week. And this is my big focus. We think that there is a great need to remove some of the barriers of innovation, to help the change makers and smaller companies to get to the shelves or create winning new recipes and formulas, but also to help large companies adopt some of these new technologies, some of these new ingredients, and be able to add a little bit of the startup mentality, start fast, fail fast. How do you the product development cycle to be very lean, and how do
Mhm.
you go from the ideation to concept to prototyping in minutes? And as you said, consumers, we don't know what we want. Sometimes we want other things, depends on our mood. Even trying to capture what people want through questionnaires, this is always very challenging, and we don't even know what we want, and it's like a very a complex question. So companies going under this virtuous cycle, trying we're gonna see many changes and the needs for reformulation, for regulatory, for consumer changes, for geopolitical reasons, for the climate change will affect the agricultural output. So we will see companies that need to be agile and have lean product development cycles, put products on the market, understand the nuances. The regional consumers are very different even from city to city, and never from country to country. So what we're going to see with Proxy, we have the new version. It's going to be released next month. In the next quarters, we're going to have a more commercially available side of the platform for more general adoption. We're going to announce in later 25 and early 26 some of the big collaborations we have with some of the largest F&B companies in the world that we're very proud, and we will announce soon. We have a secret project, stealth project, that we probably announce in the second half of 25. And Mia will continue, working on that, and everyone interested, please feel free to reach out. We can schedule a demo, so what we're building, and see if this is something of interest to you. So many updates from Proxy. With cellular, also with NCA, we're going to see updates, and with cellular agriculture Greece and some of the collaborations we will do with universities, with some regulatory bodies, and some of these areas.
Okay, it sounds exciting. I mean, we're like, where can we? We'll post information online about where people can follow you. Where's the best place to do that? LinkedIn, your website? Do you have a newsletter?
LinkedIn and also on the website, but personally, like most of the posts we post them on LinkedIn. This is the main area, but also on the website we have a newsletter, and we share some of the updates. So feel free to add me. I'm more than happy to connect, share like my understanding so far around cellular agriculture and around AI. There are multiple opportunities, but there are also multiple limitations. It's very important to understand how these tools could be used to make the food science and food product developers easier and not add any complexity. And, we did many of the experiments and of the mistakes that we had to do, and we're more than happy to share some of the insights and experiences to save some time to other food product developers and food creators and creators of the world.
No, it sounds great, interesting. I mean, I'd actually love to learn more about it. But in any case, we'll follow you on LinkedIn and we'll be posting that. Panos, thanks so much for your time today. It was really interesting to speak to you. It sounds like some cool stuff you're working on. Definitely we'll pay attention to some of those announcements, and maybe even we'll meet sometime at some conferences sometime this year, different food conferences in the US. So, wishing you all the best, and thanks again.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to speak with you since the very first time. I look forward to speaking with you again, either in person. You're welcome in DC anytime, or in Athens, Greece, even better. If for the time finds you, or we meet in any conferences. But thank you so much for the insightful conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. Take care, Panos. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Daniel. Thank you. Bye bye.